Welcome to Perspective and Potential, where we uncover new ways to see the world and tap into the incredible potential within each of us. I'm Abigail Straight, joined by my co host and mother, Gwen Fund. Together, we'll explore ideas, stories, and strategies designed to help you grow, shift your perspective, and embrace a more complete version of yourself. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at perspectiveandpotential.com. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in and see where a new perspective might take you. Today, we're diving into the topic of unity. We're going to explore the dynamics of unity and strength and the weakness that's produced by division. So whether in our homes, our communities, or even within ourselves, the presence or absence of unity has the power to shape outcomes. We'll look at what unity really means, what makes it so challenging in today's world, and how we can each play a role in create. We'll look at what unity really means, what makes it so challenging in today's world, and how we can each play a role in creating stronger bonds, even amidst our differences. But first, I think we need to understand what's working against unity. What about unity just seems to be so perpetually elusive?
Well, we've all heard the old adage, united we stand and divided we fall. It's common knowledge that we really are stronger when we're unified in partnerships, in our marriages, our families, our communities, and in our countries. And yet, there are so many things that can and do divide us. We have differing opinions. We come from different cultures. We have different desires, beliefs, skin colors, and sexualities. Our very personalities are different from one another. And even our sense of fashion shows our individuality. And how it can even be possible to achieve unity when all of these variables come into play in our relationships. But for me, I think it's about our focus. Now, our brains are technically wired to notice difference. Because changes in our environment or in the body language of somebody close to us can alert us to possible danger. So it comes naturally to see differences, but it takes focus and effort to look for and find common ground. So first, let's kind of look at what unity actually does for us. So unity in any group, whether that's a family, a neighborhood, a church, a government, or just a cause, that unity can build strength far beyond the individuals, some of the participants. Because with combined resources, like the cumulative knowledge and skills compacted in that group, it means we're better able to accomplish our goals. We're each more confident, actually, when we're in a group, and we can foster a greater influence, and we do provide mutual support to each other.
That makes so much sense. And I love what you said about the strength being greater than the sum of its parts, because I've seen that in action. But it's also true that it's easy to slip into focusing on what divides us instead of what unites us. Why do you think that happens so naturally? And I know you already mentioned about the brain is naturally wired to focus on what's different, but is it just human nature or is there more at play? And why do we tend to focus on that separation versus connection?
Well, many times, in fact, all the time, actually, in society, when any particular group is singled out in some way, all members of that particular group will be treated differently. And it goes like rich people are treated differently by poor people are treated differently by rich people, depending on race, religion, sexuality, or even political stance. We tend to treat people who are in a different group than us, we treat them differently. And that causes friction between the groups. And this friction then, it tends to magnify every other difference between us. And when we feel separate from a particular group, we can begin to objectify them. Now, in other words, we see them more as objects to be used, discarded, or treated without respect. And again, we're talking about our focus. We're no longer including them as one of us. And since the Roman era, divide and conquer has been a successful tactic for conquest. Dividing people into groups breaks down their shared strength and knowledge. And we've seen the result in many people being enslaved or murdered because of this dividing into this us versus them kind of mentality. Now, I think it's interesting to note here that our country was founded by people of differing cultures and religions who came here for religious and personal freedom. Now, that desire for religious and personal freedom is the thing that actually united them to fight the Revolutionary War and create a new government that protected those rights. So I don't think our differences necessarily divide us if we can unite under some common cause. And it's been very interesting to look at our history and the number of different religions that are very active in our society, and yet uh, that mutual respect and allowing each one to worship as they please. Um, I think that proves that differences don't have to divide us.
I completely agree. And that's a fantastic perspective because it is reassuring to think that unity does not require that we're all the same. It requires some sort of shared vision. As a leader, I know that this is absolutely true because I have hired an entire team of people, and I can assure you they are not the same. They don't even have the same skill set all the way across the board. But as a leader, I always know in whatever capacity I've served in leadership that if you have a strong team, and you're all rowing in the same direction, right? Then there is unity in your action. And it's interesting because sometimes some of the most unlikely things can unite people in an action or in a cause. And you can look around and it can be, a very motley crew of people, but if we're all focused, like you said, you keep saying that word focus, if we're focused on the same goal, um, there's strength in that.
Oh, there definitely is. So I remember this story from about 15 years ago when a mine collapsed in Chile. And there were 33 miners who then became trapped underground. Um, and they were trying desperately to find a way, to get to these guys. They, but it took 69 days. Now, these 33 men had limited resources down there. And you would think in a situation like that, that emotions would be running high, that there would be a lot of fear. There would be a lot of competition for the limited resources that they had. But to their credit, these 33 men made daily prayer um, their hallmark, and all their decisions were made democratically. And they all agreed to rationing those resources. And due to that unity, due to their mutual respect for one another, and their willingness to live or die together. They were all able to be rescued. Um, and I just think that's a fantastic story to show us that even in the worst of times, we don't have to fight with each other.
No, I think that's a fantastic example. And while you were talking about that story, I immediately thought of the word empathy. You know, every person in that situation could truly empathize with the man next to them. And um I think that is an incredible um trait that we should all seek to develop, is allowing ourselves to become it, to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and truly walk the road that they're walking, or at least imagine what that perspective might be. I feel like if we can learn to be more empathetic, then not only will we become more unified with the people around us, but I know that that is the path to learning to love people that we thought we might never be able to. So, do you believe that unity requires agreement, or do you think it's more about mutual respect in the very face of differences?
Well, of course, in the case of those miners, it really was both. The fact that they had democratic voting and they all adhered to the needed rationing, that says volumes about their character and about their mutual respect for one another. But I personally think unity requires being able to zoom out of our own personal desires and see the greater good that can be accomplished if we're all united in worthy causes. Of course, because of our innate differences, there are going to be times that we can't all agree on what a worthy cause is. And that's where looking for the common ground comes in. We are all different in many ways. But I think if we look at religious teachings and the foundation of governmental law, we do see that there are some universal truths that we should all be united with. Number one, human life is valuable. I mean, scriptures and law tell us thou shalt not kill. Number two, unfortunately, law is essential to protect our civil liberties because not everyone, has that character and that empathy that you were talking about. And number three, I think this is the big one, that we are all brothers and sisters in God's eyes. Now, these fundamentals provide the framework for that mutual respect and willingness to cooperate with one another instead of competing. Now, admittedly, unity requires compromise, and it requires a willingness to be content with the part that we are needed to perform. Sometimes I think our egos, our fears, and, sometimes just our personalities get in the way of our being willing to be united. And we have seen a lot of division throughout history. And consequently, we have seen a lot of wars. And sometimes there will be times when we just have to agree to disagree.
I definitely agree with that. As you were talking, though, I was thinking, I think another thing that sometimes unity calls for, and it's okay, but oftentimes people don't feel like it's okay, is a little bit of sacrifice. I think we
Mhm.
have to be willing to um,
Compromise. Give a
compromise,
little.
give a little, which means you might not get absolutely everything you want. Um, but I think what can also be hard, especially when you care about maintaining unity, is when you're the one trying to bridge the gap. Because that happens too, right? Maybe you're not the one who is contentious or being the stick in the mud, digging your heels in. But if you're in the middle of that and there's other people that aren't willing to meet you halfway, and I've been in that place before, um, more than once, where I found myself in the middle of tension, and not because I caused it, by the way, but because my job is to keep systems and people moving, right? But people, by their very nature, like you said, we're trained to notice those differences, or sometimes we're so focused on what we are doing that that trumps what other people are doing. And so here's what I've learned in these moments is that unity doesn't always mean the perfect resolution. Sometimes it just means being the steady presence in the chaos, or choosing to stay respectful, grounded, solution focused, even when emotions are high, which can be hard. I think high emotions can rattle us. So, one strategy that's helped me is to pause before reacting and ask myself, what outcome am I really hoping for? And I can recall a situation when I was a sixth grade teacher, actually, and I had um, my sixth grade students, we're talking about like 12-year-olds who were struggling with a specials teacher, right? They used to leave my class for a period of time during the day, and they would go to a specials class. And in this one particular specials class, they really struggled with the teacher. They were in that class for all of 40 minutes, and they only went to that class once a week. Um, but I would always get the worst behavior reports when they went to this class. And the lesson I taught my sixth graders, I remember I turned around on my whiteboard one day and I just wrote the words, "What is your goal?" Question mark. And we had a conversation. I paused learning. I paused traditional learning for that moment. And I said, "What's your goal? Is your goal to be right? Is your goal to stand your ground with the teacher, the authority figure in that classroom? Or is your goal to get through those 40 minutes and get back to this class? Because if that's your goal, then surely you can choose to control your impulses, to be rebellious, to, be argumentative. And that will also keep you out of getting some sort of consequence for your behavior in that class." And so that's the conversation that we had. And it really was a game changer for a few students in my class who realized, okay, I may not like this individual, but I can get along for 40 minutes so that I can obtain my goal, which is just to get back to my class. And I think that question, what is your goal? It either highlights the problem, or it can shift our focus from winning the argument to preserving the relationship, or just really advancing the bigger goal. When we try to listen, not just to what's being said, but what's underneath too, and in some of those times when we are trying to muscle through a problem, um, I think when we practice that kind of intentional empathy, it helps us de escalate the tension. And then perhaps we can also open a space for real dialogue. Um, and, when you are serving as a peacemaker, sometimes in the middle of that um, situation where you might have two people on either side of you that aren't unified, aren't agreeing, that role can also feel heavy. And I want to talk about that for just a second, because you're trying to hold space, right, for both to see the bigger picture.
Mhm.
But you're also navigating your own emotions in that process.
Yes, you
So
are.
I I think, it's hard, it can be challenging, but I love what you said too about prayer, because have been moments where I'm walking into a situation where I have to be that mediator, and I know I'm not gonna be able to do this alone. And so if you can go in with the right mindset, asking for some support, and you lead with grace, that choice can shift the atmosphere and invite others to meet you in that middle space. You can kind of set the example and the tone. And I think it allows us to stay aligned with our values, even when others aren't ready to come together yet, but it invites them to.
And that invitation to the Spirit invites revelation and inspiration, which, heavens to Betsy, we all need sometimes, right? So,
Absolutely.
honor, the body of Christ metaphor actually in the New Testament in 1 Corinthians 12 is really a great example of how unity is supposed to work. So the Apostle Paul compared the Christian church to the body of Christ. But I think that analogy actually uh, exemplify, exemplifies perfectly how unity blesses all of us. So each part, of course, of the body is different, but all parts of the body are essential to the whole. And when they all work together, the body can accomplish amazing things. But the head, without the body, would be severely impaired from being able to accomplish all of its great ideas. And of course, the body without the head would not know how to function at all. So if you've ever broken a little toe or sprained your wrist, you know how even those small parts of us can impede our progress. So if we take that same analogy and kind of superimpose it on any group actually that we're a part of, we can begin to grow together in unity. So I'd like to just, kind of take marriage and family, for instance. Now, this analogy works very well there. So our head consists of two lobes of our brain connected by the corpus callosum. Now, one lobe of that brain is very analytical and concrete. The other is very creative and emotional. And when those two lobes work in unity, they can understand and imagine endless thoughts. But we have two eyes, two ears, two arms, two legs, two hands, and 2 feet. But each side of the body is controlled by the lobe on the opposite side of the head. So, in order for this body to function optimally, the brain and the body have to cooperate. So, this is much like a marriage where you have a husband and a wife, and they have differing strengths, but they have to work together to accomplish the task of establishing and growing a family. Even conception and creating the future generation requires input from both parties. And raising and teaching a child is best accomplished when both parents are involved and nurturing. Um, and there will be many different tasks involved in that caring for and nurturing. There's laundry to be done, and cooking, and diapering, and talking, and coaching. There's all those different things that have to go into raising that child. And those can all be compared to, different aspects of the body as well.
Is there any risk in pursuing unity? Like, is there a possibility that you can lose a sense of identity or autonomy?
Well, I do think that's an interesting question because if I'm being honest, I think the answer is yes and no. Because when we pursue unity, we are choosing to identify with a particular group or an idea or a cause. So we have used our autonomy to make that decision. And we can always choose to distance ourselves if we find that, that cause does no longer align well with who we are. But we do need to be careful that we don't follow blindly, or that we don't find ourselves so caught up in groupthink that suddenly we get led into avenues that we otherwise would not choose to visit. So I really think that's what happens when peaceful protests turn into violent, destructive chaos. We do need to be very much in charge of our choices, because I don't think unity means changing our moral code or our core beliefs. I really think it's more about finding that common ground, if you can, and keeping a focus of mutual concern and respect for one another. Now, Christ has counseled us to love God and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So when we zoom out to this worldview focus, we can see ourselves as being united with all of mankind through our mutual relationship with the divine. It's not us and them, it's just us. And that breeds the mutual respect that we need to have in order to seek that common ground and allow others to be different from us without passing judgment on our differences. But we do tend to gather with like-minded others, and major life differences can create necessary boundaries. And the need for governmental law is evidence that when mutual respect is absent, sometimes that middle ground just isn't available.
I do love what you said, though, and I think it's just worth repeating that with the divine, it's not us and them, it's just us. As we come to a close today, let's pinpoint the most crucial points from our talk and consider how they apply to our daily lives. Today, we've explored the idea that unity does not mean uniformity. It means choosing to value connection over division. We've seen how focusing on what unites us can lead to strength, progress, and mutual support, whether in families, communities, or even during extreme circumstances like the Chilean miners. And we've talked about how each of us has a role to play in bridging gaps, even when it's hard, by choosing mutual respect, compassion, and a shared sense of purpose. Unity absolutely may require effort. It may require compromise, and it most likely will require humility. But it also brings a kind of strength that we can't find alone. So as you go about your day, ask yourself, where can I be a builder of unity? What shift in focus could help me find common ground? In our next episode, we're going to discuss goal setting and time management. If you'd like to learn more about this podcast, please be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. Your input helps shape the conversation and makes perspective and potential even more impactful. We're Gwen and Abby, and you've been listening to Perspective and Potential. Until next time, keep exploring new perspectives, and remember that every small change can lead to something big. Food for thought.
Bon appetit.